The studio lights hummed softly, brushing warmth across my skin. I smoothed the silk of my teal blouse, feeling the gentle slide of fabric against my wrists. The makeup artist had just finished her touch-ups, but I didn't need the mirror to know I looked composed, professional, polished, in control. Yet beneath that calm, there was a pulse of nerves I couldn't hide. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message. I glanced down. Watching you, Sophie. Mom and Dad. My chest tightened. I had spent years building walls around that old wound, but this was unexpected. I leaned back in the chair, letting my eyes take in the view through the studio window, the city lights stretching like glittered confetti, unaware of the small dramas unfolding behind glass. I could hear the distant chatter of crew, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. A subtle irony curled in my chest. After all the years they missed, now they were watching me on a screen, anticipating a life I built alone. I swallowed, steadying my thoughts. There was hurt, yes, a sting that lingered like an old scar. But also pride, resilience, and maybe, just maybe, the quiet satisfaction of knowing they'd finally see me, not as the girl they skipped over, but as the woman I became. I took a deep breath. Lights, camera, truth. I still remember that day like it was etched into my chest. I was 16, clutching the certificate for Best Young Writer at my high school's annual awards ceremony. My hands trembled, not with nerves about standing on stage, but from the anticipation of seeing them in the audience. I had imagined their proud faces, smiles broad, applause louder than anyone else's. But they weren't there. I sat in the auditorium, heart thudding painfully against my ribs, scanning row after row of parents. Every cheer and clap felt like a hollow echo. I tried to force a smile when my name was called, but the hollow victory tasted bitter on my tongue. The teachers whispered congratulations, classmates patted my back, but none of it could fill the space left by their absence. My mom had claimed she was busy with work. My dad had a last-minute meeting. I wanted to scream that my life, my small victories, deserved more than excuses. I wanted them to know I was here, that I mattered. Afterwards, I wandered into the school library, hiding behind the tall shelves, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. That's when Mrs. Langston, my English teacher, found me. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Sophie, the world will notice you when they're ready, but you have to be ready first. Never let anyone decide your worth." She handed me a worn leather journal. "Write everything. Every dream, every fear. Keep it close. Someday, you'll see what this can become." Clutching that journal, I felt a spark ignite, a quiet, determined fire. I wasn't going to wait for validation. I wouldn't let their absence define me. I promised myself that day, with trembling lips and a pounding heart, that I would build a life so unmistakably mine that no one could overlook it again. That journal became my compass, guiding me through the lonely nights, the doubts, and the small triumphs that would eventually stitch together the woman I was destined to become. After that day in the library, I threw myself into writing like it was the only lifeline I had. Nights blurred into mornings. My fingers often ached from endless drafts, but I couldn't stop. Every word I wrote, every story I completed, was a small rebellion against the memory of that empty auditorium seat. It was during one of those late-night sessions at a local coffee shop that I met Miss Harper, a seasoned editor with a sharp eye and a kind smile. She noticed my frantic notes and asked to read a few pages. "Sophie," she said after a long pause, "you have a voice that can't be ignored. Don't wait for someone else to believe in you. Start now. Start quietly, but start." I took her advice seriously. I wrote, edited, submitted, and rejected, over and over again. The early days were brutal, rejection letters piling up, self-doubt gnawing at the edges of my confidence, and nights when I wondered if anyone would ever read my words. Yet I kept going. My journal, the one Mrs. Langston gave me, sat at my side every night, a reminder that my story was mine to tell. Slowly, small victories emerged, A short story published in a local magazine, a modest freelance contract, the first payment that made me realize my work could sustain me. Each success was a quiet thrill, unshared with my parents. I posted updates online, but I downplayed them, careful not to draw attention to the scale of my achievements. With Ms. Harper's mentorship, I grew more confident. She introduced me to editors, guided me through marketing my work, and encouraged me to pitch ideas to bigger outlets. I learned how to navigate the industry, handle criticism, and build my own network. The months turned into years, and with each passing day, the girl who once cried in the library began transforming into a woman whose words could command attention and respect. I still remember the night I signed my first significant contract for a televised feature. Alone in my tiny apartment, I held the papers against my chest, smiling through tears. The apartment was modest, but the sense of independence it represented was monumental. For the first time, I realized that my success didn't need their approval, it only needed my determination and hard work. By the time I landed the opportunity to appear on national TV, my career had quietly flourished for years. The polished, confident woman I saw in the mirror that morning was a culmination of sleepless nights, mentorship, resilience, and silent victories. My parents had no idea of the life I had built, the empire I was quietly creating, or the woman I had become. And yet, there was a subtle thrill in imagining their faces when they finally realized that the girl they ignored had become someone extraordinary. The studio was alive with energy. Cameras whirred, lights blazed, and the audience murmured with anticipation. I adjusted my blazer one last time, taking in the gleam of polished floors, the rows of sleek seats, and the backdrop of vibrant screens. Everything looked impressive, but I knew the most important moment wasn't about appearances. It was about truth. My heart skipped when the host leaned closer and whispered, "Your parents are watching, Sophie." They insisted on a front-row live feed at home. I paused, letting the words sink in. They had chosen to watch from a distance, yet they were here, now. I felt the familiar tug of old pain, but it mingled with something far sweeter, quiet, unshakable pride. When the cameras went live, I stepped forward with a calmness I had earned. The spotlight reflected off my awards displayed subtly behind me on the desk, certificates from prestigious writing competitions, framed articles, and small tokens of recognition from my mentors. The set was elegant but personal, my fingerprints on every corner of my success. Then came the moment. A pre-recorded segment showcased my journey, the stories I'd written, the interviews I'd given, the accolades I had quietly collected over the years. It was carefully narrated, focusing on my professional achievements, but anyone watching closely could sense the personal triumph woven beneath every word. I could almost see them, my parents, through the tiny lens in my mind. Their eyes widening, their mouths parting slightly, disbelief slowly settling in. They had imagined me struggling unnoticed, perhaps even failing. And here I was, poised, articulate, accomplished, and radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing your own worth. After the segment, the host turned to me. "Sophie, everyone is amazed by your journey. Can you tell us what it took to get here?" I smiled, letting the moment stretch just long enough to let them take it in fully. It took late nights, mentorship, self-belief, and learning that sometimes the people you expect to cheer the loudest aren't the ones who will. But that's okay. I found my own applause. A hush settled over the studio. The audience clapped, but it wasn't the noise I felt. It was the knowledge that my parents were watching, and finally, they were seeing the woman I had become, not the girl they ignored. I continued, softening my tone slightly. I've realized that success isn't just about recognition. It's about showing up for yourself when no one else does. And for those who missed the chance to witness it, well, now you're here. And I hope you understand what was always possible, even when you weren't there. I let the words hang, letting the cameras pan across my awards and accomplishments. I watched their imagined reactions, astonishment, shame, guilt, a dawning realization of what they had missed. For the first time in years, the power had shifted. I wasn't the girl overlooked in the auditorium. I was the woman standing in the spotlight, fully seen, fully accomplished, fully in control. After the show wrapped, I invited my parents to meet me at the studio. Their expressions were unreadable at first, half disbelief, half awkwardness. I gestured toward the awards, the carefully curated workspace, the walls lined with evidence of my years of toil. "This is the life I've built," I said calmly. Not because of anyone else, but despite the people who didn't show up when it mattered. My mom's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, my dad's jaw tightened. I could feel the weight of years pressing down, the gap of absence trying to fill itself in an instant. But I knew that real reconciliation couldn't happen through emotion alone. It required structure, clarity, and respect. "I want to reconnect," I continued, "but it's on certain terms. First, honesty. No excuses about the past. Acknowledge what happened and accept that it shaped me, for better or worse." My father shifted uncomfortably, and I let the silence settle. Then I added, "Second, self-growth. You can't relive my life, but you can choose to improve your own. Pursue your passions, confront your shortcomings, and take responsibility for your choices. I'll support that, but only if you commit to it genuinely." I walked them through the room, letting my hand hover near the journal I had carried since high school. And finally, I said, holding it up, "Respect my independence. I've worked too hard to let old patterns dictate my life. If we are going to have a relationship, it must be built on trust, understanding, and boundaries. Not guilt, not obligation." For a moment, the air seemed thick with tension, but then I saw a shift. My mother's shoulders relaxed slightly, my father's gaze softened. They weren't just observing my life. They were learning how to engage with me as the woman I had become. I allowed compassion to enter, even as I maintained firmness. "I care about you," I said. "But caring doesn't mean sacrificing myself or returning to the dynamics that hurt me. We start fresh, with clarity, honesty, and mutual respect." It wasn't an ultimatum, it was empowerment. I had given them a chance to reconnect, but it was clear. They needed to meet me in the present, not dwell in the past. The balance had shifted. I was no longer the child waiting for applause in an empty auditorium. I was the architect of my own life, setting conditions for anyone who wished to be part of it. For the first time, I sensed the possibility of real, meaningful connection. But it would take effort, humility, and courage from them, and strength, patience, and resolve from me. And I was ready. Weeks passed after our confrontation, and subtle changes began to show. My parents started attending my events, not as bystanders, but as participants in a new kind of relationship. My mom enrolled in a writing workshop, her curiosity genuine, and my dad volunteered at a local community center, finding purpose beyond his old routines. They were learning to step into their own growth, rather than trying to reclaim mine. I watched these changes with quiet satisfaction, a warmth that hadn't been there before. The anger and hurt I once carried had softened, replaced by a sense of empowerment and peace. I realized that my journey wasn't just about achieving success. It was about reclaiming my narrative, setting boundaries, and allowing space for those willing to grow. Late one evening, I sat at my apartment desk, fingers brushing the worn leather cover of my journal. It had been with me through every sleepless night, every rejection, every triumph. Flipping through the pages, I smiled at the dreams I had once scribbled in fear and hope. That journal had witnessed my transformation, and now it felt like a silent partner in my story of resilience. I thought about the young girl who had cried in the library, feeling unseen and dismissed. She would be proud that I had not only survived her absence, but had flourished in spite of it. The life I had built wasn't just for me. It was a testament to perseverance, self-respect, and the courage to believe in oneself when no one else does. Looking out the window, city lights twinkling like distant applause, I felt an unshakable calm. I had faced the past, confronted those who once ignored me, and emerged stronger, not bitter, but wiser. My parents were learning too, but the final victory was mine. The ability to stand fully in my own power, unshaken and unapologetic. I closed the journal, holding it close for a moment before placing it gently on the shelf. I am enough, I whispered to myself, a soft smile curving my lips. I always have been. And now, finally, the world and my parents can see it too.